Well, Brandon, let's move on into our next segment. We're taking a look at your favorite conference, one you like to talk about. We talked about them last week, and the fast break curse, or not the fast break, the primetime podcast curse is back again, where we talk about a team that's really hot. They lose their next game. The Arizona State Sun Devils were the ones that fell. We talked really high about Herm Edwards, what they're doing. They're going to beat San Diego State, and they lost.
And you know what's really funny is that watching game day on Saturday morning, everyone on game day, Arizona State, and then it gets to Herbie, and he goes, yeah, I'm going against you. I'm going to go San Diego State. He goes, everything seems to be going against them, so they'll win. And they did. And
I saw that, and I was like, the primetime podcast curse strikes again. The one I'll never forget is basketball season. We did the Hawkeyes, and we're like, oh, could the Hawkeyes do this and that because they're so great? And they lost their next two, and their season was over.
We did that so many times.
Michigan State, too. They're undefeated. Can they? And they lost. Like the next game,
exactly.
They lost.
It totally happens every time.
The game we're talking about this week, and we're taking an in-depth look on, is Stanford, Oregon. This one taking place in Eugene, Oregon. Both teams 3-0. Stanford number 7, Oregon number 20. And usually, Brandon, I usually toss it to you. I say, oh, what are you thinking about this game? And the question for this one is basically, should the Cardinal be worried about the Ducks? But instead, I'm going to take this one first. I'm actually going to Brett Favre it. The pass was tipped at the line of scrimmage, and now I have caught it, and I'm trying to run for some yards to gain in this one. And this is, to me, an interesting game early in the year because these are two teams. Both of them are 3-0, and here's the reason why. I'm going to set up the stage for why Stanford should be worried. If you're a Stanford fan, why you should be worried about going into Oregon, going into Eugene to play the Ducks. And that is because for 3 straight weeks, Brandon, I have seen first week 1 against San Diego State. First off, Stanford only led 9-7 going into halftime. The second thing, 0 first quarter points. Then against USC, you went into halftime leading 7-0, but you only scored 7 points in that first quarter. Then UC Davis, you went into halftime up 17-3, but you went into the second quarter down 3-0. Yet again, a goose egg in the first quarter. Whereas I look at Oregon, and the only game they have kind of struggled in the first quarter, game 1 against Bowling Green. They're down 10-7, but then they score 30 in the second quarter. Then Portland State, they're already up 14-0. Then they go up, what would that be? 35-7 going into half. Then you've got the last game against San Jose State. They're already up 14-0 after 1. They go into halftime up 21-6. They win 35-22. And that is the reason why I would be worried if I was Stanford, because this Stanford offense to me, and based off of the opponents you have played, San Diego State, I know we just said they beat Arizona State. They're a team that you started off slow against. Any other team, if you played any other respected team, if you played a Washington week 1, no way you're going into half only up 9-7. You're probably going down in that game 38-9 based off of how you played. Then you also play a team like UC Davis, and you're down 3-0 going into the second quarter. If I'm Stanford, I'm worried because if this offense starts out slow in this one, then they don't got a chance in my mind. Patrick Kane-isms, not a chance in this one, because there's a good thing that if this Cardinal team starts out slow, Brandon, they could be down 14, 21, 28 points going into halftime, going into the second quarter even against the Ducks in Eugene.
I think the biggest thing for me is what's going on with Bryce Love. What's going on with Bryce Love? An undisclosed injury that was suffered late in the USC win, and they pulled him out of that one, and he didn't return. He did not play this past week against UC Davis. So, I know it was just UC Davis, but you hold him out of that game, most likely because you didn't need him anyways. But he doesn't play at all. Stanford head coach David Shaw says that he expects for a senior running back to be out there in week 4. But again, what's going on with him? What happened? And is he for sure going to be out there, and will he be at 100%? If he is not, 2 out of the 3 games that Bryce Love has played in so far, excuse me,
he's played 2 games.
He's played 2 games because he was not in the third one, but his first game, it was a clunker. Second game against USC, it was really good. Then he doesn't play in the third game. Bryce Love is off to a shaky season so far due to ineffectiveness and now injury. And that's what I'm most worried about. That is what I'm the most worried about when you're talking about the Stanford Cardinal, because it is Bryce Love who has been their offense, their centerpiece for so long. It's like with the Minnesota Vikings back in the day. You take Adrian Peterson away, and then all of a sudden, what do you have? And that's how I feel like this team is right now. So if you do not have Bryce Love against a quality opponent like an Oregon team, what do you have? What will your team be able to do? How do you adjust? And while I do think that there has been some good play so far this season by KJ Costello, I think he's done well. I still don't know if you put everything on him. Is he going to be able to shoulder all of that against an Oregon Ducks type of team? He had 183 yards and a touchdown against USC, and I think would probably be, out of the 3 games, the one game that you look at and say, okay, this is probably how he could really be, because he's going against a tougher USC team. But after this weekend, I don't know if that still holds after getting throttled by Texas. But that's where I'm at right now. And I like what Oregon's doing. The Ducks are playing some good football. Now, have they played against lesser opponents so far to start the season? Yes, they have. And also, you look at the amount of points that each team's giving up. I think Stanford's around 8 points, and the Ducks are around 20.
Yeah. 7.7 to 20 are the 2. And for me, like, the biggest thing, like I said, is now the question is, can Stanford's defense hold the Ducks back? I look at that equation. Anytime you're talking Ducks, I look at that equation and go, it's not a standard. It's not like you're in algebra class, and it's not like your standard x minus 2 equals y. It's not one of those. It's one of your, like, x minus y parentheses to the second minus this square root of that. It's like this big equation where you got to solve for x, and you're sitting there and you're just going, damn it, how do I do this one? That's what it is with Oregon. And for me, the only reason, I said at the beginning of the segment, the only reason why I'm worried for Stanford is because of how slow they have started in games. Like, this is not the type of game where UC Davis, you can get away with, we didn't start good in the first half, we didn't start good in the first quarter, picked it up at halftime, and then we blew away with it. Where most teams in the first 2 weeks, we see slow start first half, go into halftime, get coached up, come out ready to go, and then they just blow the doors off in the second half. You can't do that against Oregon, because if you blink, Oregon's up 21-0. You blink again, they're up 35-0. And that's the thing for me, which, because of the offense's inability to score early in the game, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this defense to get stops early in the game, because I'm not confident in the Cardinal to go pound for pound, score for score with the Ducks in a first quarter to start the game on Saturday.
Here's what I will say. Well, when we came into this season, Ricky, when we were doing the preview, going all the way back to the preview for Stanford.
Don't you love how they all changed by this time?
But we did talk about their defense and how this season their defense was going to be different. Was it going to be their defense that held them back? And I think that is still something that, as we continue on, we'll be able to see a little bit more of as they start to get into conference play, more of conference play, and see what happens here. But will this defense be able to make Justin Herbert feel uncomfortable. Now, Justin Herbert, he's thrown 12 touchdown passes through 3 games, but he's also thrown 4 interceptions. And here's the thing, is that in 2 of his 3 games, his passer completion percentage has been under 50%. In the game against Portland State, he had it up almost near 77% on his completion rate. That's outstanding. But the other 2, it was 47.6 against Bowling Green, 47.1 against San Jose State, and those were the 2 games where he threw 2 interceptions apiece. Can Stanford's defense capitalize on bringing pressure against him and making some big plays off of some errant throws that Herbert has already so far this season against lesser opponents been prone to throwing? So now if they're able to do that, Stanford would get the advantage in my mind. But if they're not, and if Bryce Love is either not playing or not playing up to his standard, that could really spell bad things for Stanford.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at it and really, I mean, you look at the only game where Herbert, it would be like his worst game, you could say, is probably the last one stat-wise, but it's not even that terrible. Like, 47 completion percentage is god-awful. I don't care what you're saying. You want to be around that 60 mark. You want to at least be at 50 at the end of the day. Yeah, he had 309 yards, but only 3 touchdowns to 2 INTs. Whereas game 1, yeah, he was at about 48 completion percentage, but he had 5 touchdowns to 2 INTs, and he had a rush on the ground for another score. Can this defense, like, that's the true question you asked. Can this Stanford defense hold the Oregon offense? And for me, I just look at what Oregon's done and take it with a grain of salt, because like you also said early on, look at the opponents Oregon has played so far. They've played Bowling Green, they've played Portland State, and they've played San Jose State. So they're not really playing world beaters out there.
No, they're not.
To start the year. And if you even look at, like, if you look at last year's game, which I know is a little, like, it's a little different to look at last year because Herbert wasn't there. Cristobal wasn't the head coach. Royce Freeman was out there. He's not there now. So this team is different, but Oregon went into Stanford, and the thing that helped Stanford out is, yeah, they won 49-7, but they won the first quarter. The first quarter, they won 21-7. Then after that, it was touchdown, touchdown. Oh, 2 touchdowns here. And they kept Oregon in check. Oregon only scored 7 points, which they got in that first quarter, but 21 first quarter points from Stanford. They're going to need that again because I don't think this Stanford defense has it in them to do what they did last year and only hold the Ducks to 7 points all game.
I don't think they do either. They've lost too much, and they haven't been able to gain enough back in terms of recruiting and everything like that. This Oregon Duck team, yes, they have put up a lot of points against opponents that aren't at this level that Stanford is, but still they've put up a lot of points. And Justin Herbert coming into the season, I know I told you when we talked about Oregon in their preview, I was really excited for this kid. I was really excited. I think that he's going to be really good, and so far this season, he's come out and he's looked pretty darn good for the most part. Like you said, and like I mentioned, would love to see the completion percentage certainly be above 50, be near the 60 mark, and those interceptions take those away. That's 4 through 3 games. But he's also been able to score a lot. He's been able to put up a lot of points. But what are you doing when you're not putting up a lot of points? Are you still throwing those interceptions, or are you being careful? And I don't want to say conservative because people hear conservative in sports and they think, you're not trying.
But
you're not trying to score.
You're not being a gunslinger out there.
Well, exactly. And that's when people would be like, well, being more like Joe Burrow is better.
Field manager.
Because he is, yes, maybe not lighting up the scoreboard, but you know what he's not doing? He's not allowing the other team to light it up either. So that's where Herbert, I think, needs to find that kind of happy medium where, yes, he's lighting up the scoreboard, but when it gets into big games, like this weekend's game will be, you cannot allow a less than stellar Stanford defense take advantage of any type of turnovers. So you just can't put the ball into their hands.
Here's the thing I'm going to say. And we're about, give or take, about a month away from our first big board for the NFL season. October 15th will be the night that you and I record our first NFL big board. And if we would have done our first one, if we would have done like a way too early, I probably wouldn't have had a single quarterback in my top 25, or like might have had one at 25. And the thing that is interesting is, like, if you look at the way too early mock draft that Mark and I did on the onside kick, although it was only 10 picks, he had Justin Herbert as a top 10 pick. He had him at number 8 going to the New York Football Giants. This is the type of game, I know this is a little bit different than the original question, but this could also be a statement game for Herbert, where if he plays well against Stanford in this type, like, he's not going to have the away crowd. He's going to be home in Autzen. He's going to be in Eugene. This could be a statement game for him. And on the other side of it, with Stanford, we just talked about college football playoff. If they lose to Oregon, not only does that hurt their Pac-12 chances, because Oregon's in the same side of the Pac-12 as them, but guess who Stanford has in their next game on the road at South Bend? They've got Notre Dame. So if you lose to Oregon and then you lose another one to Notre Dame, who has not looked amazing, but has looked better than I thought they would be this year, you lose this week to Oregon, you lose your next game to Notre Dame, your season's done. You ain't making the college football playoff. And I know you're already behind the 8 ball because you're in the Pac-12. Like Pac-12 and Big Ten, or not Big Ten, Big 12, you're kind of fighting for a spot because the SEC might be taking 2 from you.
Well, depending on how things play out, it will be interesting. Like we mentioned in one of the previous segments, anything can happen in college football, and we've seen it.
Any final thoughts? I know we're going to give the pick later, but any final thought in this one before we move on?
I think we're going to see a good game. I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think that one team is going to run away with it. It could be a shootout, but I don't think there's going to be a lopsided ball game in Eugene.
I will save my pick for the pick segment, but I will say this: 28-7 at the end of 1, Oregon. That's how I think this game is going to start out. How it finishes, you'll have to wait for the pick segment to see how that goes. But let us know what you guys think down below.
It's a tease in the biz.
That's what we call a tease in the biz. But let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. Should Stanford be worried about Oregon? Is Oregon going to get the jump on Stanford in this one? What are you thinking about this game? Are you excited for it? Not excited? Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section.